Hello and welcome. My name is Georg Hinkel, and in this short video, I'm going to show you how to implement locking in a server, implementing the Tecan or using the Tecan SiLA 2 SDK. So to implement locking, we need to add a NuGet packet reference. So basically just, I still have the SiLA 2 locking search here. So we have two things. Actually, this is not current. From the last thing, we need to install this Tecan SiLA2.features.locking package. And the thing is, once this is installed and we restart the server, so let me just start the server. Then we see that next to the greeting service that we had before and the SiLA service that is mandatory, and also the connection configuration service for SiLA 2 1.1, we also have the lock controller feature exposed. And that means if we go back to the client and start that one, then we go into a defined error exception that the send lock identifier was not valid because the lock has been released or it's expired. It means we haven't locked the server. Okay, so how do we lock the server? Because actually, if you go back into the program CS here, this greeting service client, you don't have an option to specify some kind of lock identifier in here. And the solution to this is this little thing here called the execution manager. This execution manager is actually responsible to put metadata on existing calls and also to download binaries. So if we want to use this, we actually have to use another execution manager, because the discovery execution manager that we have using so far actually doesn't support metadata and doesn't support binaries, because the discovery doesn't use metadata and doesn't need binaries. But both binaries and also metadata require actually a connection to the server, because you need to know where to upload binaries, and you need to know to which commands you have to add metadata. So yeah, we need to have another execution manager. So how to get this? And the answer is there is an execution manager factory for this. So, and this takes a couple of interceptors. So I'll just put a new list in here. Client request interceptors. Yeah. And I leave that empty for the moment. And once we have this connection to the server, we can actually say, okay, this server execution manager is just the execution manager factory dot create execution manager for the server. And then use that one for the client. Okay, so what's the change in here? The change is basically that now we have this execution manager factory that gives us an execution manager based on this client request interceptors, and this one will also support binaries. No, we don't have binaries in this greeting service, but we do have a locking and therefore metadata. But and the idea here is that we basically need to put in an implementation of this iClient request interceptor that basically describes how do you act for commands that that require, for instance, locking. And you don't have to implement that yourself. You can just download a NuGet package for that. So there's a features locking client. Where are you? There's features locking. Yeah, I can't find it. So the locking client. There you are. I can just add that NuGet package. And then pass it here. So we'll have lock locking interceptor, I think it's called. Yep. Okay, cool. And basically this locking interceptor knows exactly how to deal with calls that require locking. And if we execute this thing again, server is still running. Got the 5 seconds discovery, timeout. And then we have hello client. So basically the call succeeded. And if we take a look into the server call, what we have is that, well, here comes basically the logs for the discovery. And then we have a call to get FCP affected by metadata, which is basically feature command properties affected by this metadata, namely the log identifier. So basically this, the execution manager found, well, there's a feature that that defines a custom metadata, a custom client metadata, namely the log identifier, and then basically asks the server, okay, on which commands and properties do you want to have this log identifier? And then we wanted to execute the say hello command, and what this interceptor does before actually executing the command, it locks the server, and afterwards it's executing the actual command, putting the locking identifier that is required as metadata into the command that is actually called, and afterwards it is executing an unlock server command. So this basically hooks into the request pipeline and changes the actual call. But this basically means that you don't really have to care as a client whether a server requires locking. We can just reuse this default implementation, or you can just implement your own by having a separate implementation of this interface iClient request interceptor. Okay. And as you can imagine, other features that require custom metadata, such as authentication, work pretty much the same way. So with that, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to see you again in one of the other videos. Bye.